So a couple of days ago, I went to a gardening centre, and the idea being was to kind of get me back into the rhythm, get me back out on my camera again after the Liverpool incident, which was basically caused a bit of a write-off last week. Obviously, compared to some people's situation, I've got nothing to complain about, but it certainly wrote off the week. Monday was obviously the parade. Tuesday, after a night on the floor at Liverpool Lime Street, exhausted me. Wednesday, trying to recover me items and kind of come to terms with everything that happened, and then Friday having to meet the police to get my SD card returned to me. And as a result, it's something of a write-off. So Sunday came around and thought, right, got to get back into it, start getting the rhythm going again. So I went to a gardening centre of all places. You can get some decent photos there, some sort of colourful shots and something different after all, as opposed to the grim dystopian towns and cities. However, the dystopia can't leave you alone. So when I was walking around, something on one of the top shelves caught my attention, and I went to photograph it, and then I noticed you've got this facial recognition technology that's now in place in a gardening centre of all places, and it's just absolutely bizarre, isn't it? Why on earth do you need facial recognition technology inside a bloody gardening centre? Now, some people will obviously just say, well, what's the big deal with that? And you've got a point, fair enough. I mean, if we were in like some high trust society where you could trust all your authorities and all that, you got to remember the kind of people who say, what's your problem with that? Would be the same sort of people in the comment section saying you should never have given anything to the police, and they've got that distrust in the media, the government, the authorities in general, but they'd be quite content with being filmed and having their address, their identity revealed to people you don't even know, people who are sat in probably security booths somewhere. And if you've never heard of, Ted Bundy's, Fred West's, Dennis Nielsen's, that's extreme cases, but people who perhaps notice you've got certain items that they like, and they're sat in this secretive booth, anonymous as well, by the way. You don't know who's behind that camera, and they know your address, I would believe. Surely this facial recognition stuff will be linked to addresses, etc., and you're quite content with that. So if a complete stranger walked up to you in the street and said, give me your full name and your address, you'd tell them to jog on. But for some reason, people are quite oblivious to all this. I don't think most people, because also the way the camera's obviously high, obviously, to have that aerial advantage looking over people, to see more. But with that, of course, you kind of conditioned to CCTV now anyway. And then they've started creeping all this facial recognition technology in. I think it started getting rolled out last year in Bedford when I was at the boat festival. And then also this has continued on to Cardiff, where I think it was the rugby, England versus Wales or something like that. So it is starting to get rolled out. And of course, more than anything, people who understand the long term, I'm not saying I'm special, but kind of understand the long term goals. It's like a Chinese social credit system. There's an episode of Black Mirror called Nosedive which displays this fairly well because it's more linked in with social media as well. But essentially, it's kind of keeping you in line. You've got a certain amount of points, and if you disobey your government, like Demolition Man, Sylvester Stallone, you got to the point where these hardcore leftists start banning smoking, which Keir Starmer's already tried to do. Outside pubs, you've got hardcore leftists that probably don't agree with your voting habits and your opinions, so they'll probably deduct points off you there. If you're against, say, being colonised by Islam, that's a bad thing in their opinion, so you get more points deducted off you. If you say there's only two genders, you get points deducted off you. If you don't take certain procedures which are forced on you without your consent, or if they start saying no jab, no job, yet again, more points deducted. And of course, I'm quite bad for it sometimes, because the cash machines are getting harder and harder to get to now. So, the more often we use these cards, these debit cards, contactless, the closer we're getting to cash being stripped away, which will lead to digital IDs, which is something they're trying to creep in literally right now, and biometric technology to kind of, so for example, somewhere I'm quite familiar with, is reaching a point now where you have to scan a QR code to gain entry into a building. So in other words, you have to have an iPhone, you have to have QR codes, scanning technology and stuff, and you imagine saying all this back 20 years ago. I think YouTube's only been around 20 years, for example. And this is the world we're in now: QR codes, facial recognition technology, and it's accelerating. 10 years time, I'm convinced we'll have bloody like robots and yeah. So I know that's all scary, gloomy sort of stuff, but let's face it, if people push back, it's always a good thing. And I would say I'd never. One thing people could do is just don't ever go to these businesses ever again. Send an email, a complaint, which I still need to do if I get time. Obviously, I'm just so busy with work and all that. And it's just thoughts, just something I thought I'd bring up for people to look at, people to be aware of. As I say, let's give another example. Say I've had a few couple of incidents at say Wembley with the security guards where we had a bit of back and forth about me filming and taking photos. Waterloo Station, yet again, and every single time the security guards refused to identify themselves. So yet again, people like to be anonymous, don't they? I know they're breaking the law; they should identify themselves, but it's an example. People like to be anonymous, and you certainly wouldn't want to be giving your address away to people because people can track you down. Obviously, yeah, just some thoughts. So that's that. Cheers.